Mark Zuckerberg gets sued. But maybe this isn't a case where we ought to be cheering the demise of Mark Zuckerberg. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt. And I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. The most recent headline from the New York Times about this court case against Mark Zuckerberg's Meta. Mark Zuckerberg takes stand to defend Meta against antitrust suit. The story goes on to say Mr. Zuckerberg went to court on Monday, that is yesterday, in a trial focused on his social media company's acquisitions of Instagram and WhatsApp. The date of this story is April 14th, 2025. This is unfolding as we speak. And a lot of conservatives, a lot of Americans who cherish free speech, a lot of Americans out there who remember Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook shutting down all types of dissenting narratives against the government's preferred COVID-19 messaging, that recall how Mark Zuckerberg went to Capitol Hill and sat in hearings and very arrogantly dismissed any notions of censorship that his Facebook was doing, and then only to, when Donald Trump won the presidency, bend over backwards to all of a sudden, oh, he loves free speech from Mark Zuckerberg. I love free speech. I love free speech. I guess we did let the FBI censor us a little bit, but that's all bygones be bygones. That's all water under the bridge. The new Mark Zuckerberg, so he says, loves free speech. So now he's in court. Facing charges, allegations, accusations from the FTC saying that he has defied antitrust regulations with his acquisition of WhatsApp and Instagram. But the curious thing about this case is that he purchased WhatsApp and Instagram years and years ago with the approval of ding, 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 the FTC. So is this the case that we should all be rubbing hands in glee, right? That dastardly dog, Mark Zuckerberg, is finally going to receive his comeuppance. I don't know if this is the one, but before I get into more of that, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network at washingtontimes.com, where you may also subscribe to my 3 times a week newsletter. Go to the bottom of the page, click on the newsletter section, and enter your email address under Bold and Blunt with Cheryl Chumley. That's my newsletter. You'll get my commentaries that I write at the Washington Times every day, as well as my Tuesday and Thursday Bold and Blunt podcasts, which you may also get wherever podcasts are available. And if you are a subscriber already, I want to thank you. I want to thank you very much for being a subscriber, and mention to you who support Bold and Blunt that I have a new book out. It's called God-Given or Bust: Defeating Marxism and Saving America with Biblical Truths. And it comes just as President Donald Trump, has given us all in America this great, amazing, tremendous, can I say great? Did I say great? Easter message, right? Long gone are the days of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton talking about Easter worshipers. Now we have a president who talks about Jesus. That's right, Jesus. He uses the J word, and he also talks about how Jesus saved us from our sins so that we may have eternal life. Have you seen a president in recent history just put forth such truths so boldly and bluntly? Wow. Bold and blunt Donald Trump with his Easter message. Haven't heard a president utter such open proclamations of God since Ronald Reagan. Mark Zuckerberg takes stand to defend Meta against antitrust suit. The case, the New York Times writes, could reshape Meta's business. Let me just read a little bit from this in case you're not up on what's unwinding right now in the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. Mark Zuckerberg, the chief executive of Meta, took the witness stand on yesterday, to defend his social media empire in a landmark antitrust trial that could dismantle a company that has transformed how the world connects online. In a packed courthouse, lawyers for the Federal Trade Commission presented Mr. Zuckerberg with a binder full of dated emails and internal communications about his acquisition strategy, pushing him to defend his words. And all the conservatives out there, right, go, yay, put him on the spot, make him squirm. And listen, Mark Zuckerberg, he doesn't get any head pats from me for the way he has treated the First Amendment in America, just with such derision, right? He has really bent over backwards to do China's bidding, to censor American citizens, and then to gaslight, to pretend like, what, censorship, me? No, I love the First Amendment, so he gets no brownie points from me. But as conservatives in America, we can't just pretend, we can't just act like Democrats, right? And knee-jerk our way based on emotions to taking down political operatives, to taking down those who stand opposed to what we want in this country, and just rub our hands happily that they're being destroyed when the principle isn't correct. We have to live by principle. That's what makes conservatives, and that's what makes the Republican Party so much better than the Democrat Party, because Democrats basically today's batch of Democrats, today's Democrat Party are proud bearers of the Marxist buttons, right? They love to wave the communist flags and pretend like everything they do is for the greater good of society. They love the children. They love women's rights. They love LGBTQs. They love everybody but Donald Trump. And the reason they don't like Donald Trump is because he is just an evil man, they say. And anything that they do to damage this evil man is done in the name of righteous indignation and morality. So they're allowed to destroy Donald Trump and all that stands in Donald Trump's camp, meaning you probably and me definitely, all the MAGA types out there. But we can't afford to knee-jerk and emotion our way through life. We have to stand for something higher, particularly if you're a Christian, if you're a person of faith, right? You can't just let your emotions rule. You have to go by God's word first, and then the Constitution second. So when you look at this case that Mark Zuckerberg is fighting right now against the FTC in court, it's a little bit troubling because you don't want to be on the side of Mark Zuckerberg, right? If you value free speech, you really don't. You'd love to see him, taken down a couple of notches. And you'd love to see him being hurt and dinged financially, because it was, after all, his companies, right, that shut down free speech for so long. But you have to make sure that the dinging and damaging is being done for the right reasons. And this particular case is a little bit worrisome. Back in 2022, NPR spoke of this case, giving an update. January 11th, 2022, NPR wrote this: Judge allows Federal Trade Commission's latest suit against Facebook to move forward. And reading from that, the Federal Trade Commission's antitrust lawsuit against Facebook can proceed, a federal judge ruled, delivering a major win for the agency after its first attempt at targeting the company's alleged monopoly power was dismissed for lack of evidence. So already the case was brought. It was dismissed because there was little evidence to show that the Facebook company, owned by Mark Zuckerberg, had engaged in a monopoly. But now here we go in 2022, another judge ruled that it indeed can go forward. This time, however, the judge found, NPR wrote in 2022, that federal regulators have offered enough proof to argue that Facebook's acquisition strategy, particularly its takeover of Instagram and WhatsApp, is driven by a, quote, buy or bury, end quote, ethos. In other words, that Facebook allegedly gobbles up competitors in order to maintain an illegal monopoly. And let me just read you what U.S. District Judge, you're going to love this, James Boasberg noted in his finding. Although the agency, Boasberg wrote, may well face a tall task down the road in proving its allegations, the agency being the FTC, the court believes that it has now cleared the pleading bar and may proceed to discovery. He noted also the FTC has now alleged enough facts to plausibly establish that Facebook exercises monopoly power in the market for personal social networking services. So, how do you feel about antitrust and monopoly regulations in general? Because to me, that goes to the root of this case. At what point does it become a monopoly? At what point do antitrust laws and regulations kick in? When does it become illegal for a business to grow? That's at root here. And also at root with this particular case are several very weak arguments that the FTC is making that, in my view, I don't even think this case should have gone to court. I don't think it should be in court right now. And I hate to say that because that's, in essence, defending Mark Zuckerberg, but who is no friend to free speech, in my view. But there are ways to go about pushing back against those who violate the Constitution, meaning the First Amendment, meaning free speech. And there are ways to go about bringing court cases that are in line with constitutional provisions. And then there are ways that the Democrats use, right? They go to court to push activist judges to act on behalf of Democrat/Marxist/communist will that cannot get passed by the duly elected in Congress because the people won't stand for it. So Democrats use the court system, as we're seeing now against Donald Trump's agenda. They use the court system to bend the Constitution to their will in ways that the Constitution was never meant to be bent. But we on the Republican side, we in the conservative side, we on the sane side, right, the common sense side, the Christian side, the morally proper side, have to consider carefully before we cheer things that may be stretching the bounds of the Constitution that feel good now, but if you look down the line, may not be in the best interest of the country and the Constitution for the long term. And such is this case. And I have a great guest with me today who is the perfect source to discuss. He is Robert Bork Jr., president of Antitrust Education Project. His father, of course, penned the great book, The Antitrust Paradox, A Policy at War with Itself. And he is following this case closely and is here now to discuss. Robert Bork Jr., I want to thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. It is so great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yes, let's talk about what's going on with Meta right now with the FTC. Just run down the details for listeners, the court case.
Sure. Well, back in 2020, the end of the first Trump administration, the Federal Trade Commission filed a lawsuit, and the Federal Trade Commission and 46 states filed a lawsuit against Meta, then it was Facebook, saying that it had a monopoly on the social media platforms. It was dominant in social media platforms. This was the result. This was because it had purchased Instagram and WhatsApp about 10 years before and which was approved by the FTC. So the court, interestingly, the famous Judge Boasberg, who has this case, and also
Yes.
the Trump case. He said he threw it out. He said it was legally insufficient. There was no proof of a monopoly in social networking. But he gave leave to the FTC to sort of, restructure everything or come back with a different argument, and they did. And that case is the one that's now going to trial, a product of the Biden FTC. They carried on where the Trump administration failed. So that's what's going on now, and they have created a case which I think, and a lot of other experts think, is a weak case. It's going to take 2 months to find out, but it's a weak case because the FTC essentially invented a phony market for Meta to claim that it had a monopoly in. Now, for example, the case, it just ignores reality. And so what they did was the FTC said, you have a monopoly, but we're not going to include TikTok or MeWe or Snapchat or YouTube in the market that we're defining. If you don't, that's what antitrust is all about. Do they have a monopoly, and are they abusing their monopoly in the defined markets that we're talking about? But in the real market, if you look at what all these platforms that are out there now, Meta has less than 30% share. So, but we don't want to talk about that if we're the FTC. And that's where we are in court right now. The trial started yesterday. They put Zuckerberg on the stand. And this, as they say, is going to go on for about 2 months.
So it's interesting to me, and I think most Americans might see this just as inherently unfair, no matter how they feel about Meta or Mark Zuckerberg or monopoly laws. The fact that the FTC gave approval for the purchase years ago, and now the FTC is the one bringing the lawsuit. Yes, different administrations, but it's still the same agency. Could you speak to that?
Right. Yeah, I mean, look, I think anybody who has a sense of what is fair and reasonable in their own life would look at this and say, okay, so I asked for permission, from my job or my school or whatever 10 years ago to do something, and now the government is coming back and saying, having given that permission explicitly, is coming back and saying, no, I'm sorry, we're taking it back. So I just don't understand how they can go forward with a case like that, because I think, frankly, it creates so much uncertainty.
Yes.
For businesses, and frankly, it creates uncertainty for average people who may file a form with the government saying, I'd like to get an exemption, say for an environmental matter or for a building permit, and then the government says, on second thought, 10 years later, no. In fact, not only no, but tear your building down.
That's exactly how it strikes me as well. And the other thing I find curious, and I'm certainly no expert, I'm just reading the latest stories, is that the purchase of WhatsApp and the other media, Instagram
yeah,
was made when they were fledgling businesses, right? So sort of
right.
Meta grew them. Like, isn't that what America's all about?
Exactly. Now, of course, I think the government has some email or something from their discovery, which basically talks about how our strategy is going to be, if we can't buy it, then we're going to bury it. That sort of that kind of rough and tumble business competition talk. And maybe, that's what they were thinking. But they bought it. They didn't, and as you say, at a fledgling state, they invested hundreds of millions of dollars in both of these properties. and turned them into something quite viable. And somehow it seems to get lost in the conversation that big businesses, big tech, has really become sort of the venture capitalists, of our economy now. They find these things like Instagram or Snapchat and WhatsApp, and and then they purchase them because that's what the people who invented those products, those services want.
Yes.
There's
They want to cash in.
Right. We're going to spend our money. We're going to build this thing in the garage or whatever, and hope against hope that Meta or Google or somebody comes along and buys us out. I mean, isn't that the Elon Musk story to a certain extent? Is that he was paid billions for his investment in PayPal, I believe it was, and then turned and used that money to build Tesla and SpaceX and other things. That's sort of the I think the model that many entrepreneurs are looking at as for their future success, and for their to be able to then go on and do other things. So I think there's sort of a thinking going on. Well, first of all, it's the government, so right, they don't think much, and they don't have. I think the government is always, about a decade behind the curve. They're applying sort of economic analysis that, if they're applying it at all, and we know that during the Biden administration, they underutilized their economists. They were mostly interested in just tearing down big business without really any economic analysis.
Right.
So I think the government is just missing the curve. It's missing, we want to be riding this wave of innovation and wealth creation and growth and job creation, and taking advantage of these companies, frankly, to help us as much as it can overcome our, the weaknesses and failings of our own government, which runs up trillions and trillions of dollars of debt, and we need the growth to offset that, at least in part.
Well, this case is interesting, though, because it sort of opens up the whole question of antitrust laws in general. At what point does it become illegal for a business to grow? And is government the proper source to be picking sort of the winners and losers here? Is there a better way?
Well, the free market is, as far as I'm concerned, the best way.
Mm-hmm.
And people say, well, we don't really have a free market. Okay, we have a free enough market, and we should let the consumers be the judge and jury in what works and what we should be endorsing and allowing to thrive, and not the federal government. I'm not against, actually, nor was my father, who wrote the book The Antitrust Paradox and really changed the enforcement of antitrust law over the last 45 years. We're not against allowing, for the government enforcing antitrust laws, but it ought to be based on reality. It ought to be based on facts. It ought to be based on economics, not just sort of an antipathy towards bigness, which is what this, the Biden administration, and now, frankly, the Trump administration, I think, is to a lesser extent, but still the same, is applying as its sort of philosophy of antitrust. If it's big, it must be doing something wrong. We have to break it up. Maybe we don't. Maybe if there's not really a monopoly, like there wasn't in the antitrust case that was brought by the Biden administration against Apple, for example. Again, they gerrymandered a market, a fictitious market, where they said that Apple had a monopoly in what they called performance smartphones. Well, that was just basically one smartphone, or the smartphone market for the most expensive, highest performing, most features, smartphones. But Apple, first of all, doesn't make the most smartphones in the world. Samsung does. And Apple will sell you any smartphone you want in its entire line, including ones that are now, several years old, earlier models that are cheaper and have less features, maybe don't perform quite as well as these new performance smartphones. But the government wanted to go after Apple because it was Apple, because it was big. And so they just kept sort of narrowing the market until they got to something where they could say, aha, they have a monopoly.
Yeah, I find it interesting what you say, that you're not, and neither was your father, 100% against antitrust. And his book was The Antitrust Paradox, A Policy at War with Itself, which is a great title. And you right now are president of Antitrust Education Project. So I'm interested to get your view on this. What case would you point to, or maybe your father point to, in history that was a valid antitrust case?
Well, he actually, the two things I should say. One is the AT&T case years ago, when AT&T had a federally sanctioned monopoly in telephony. You remember that when you had to pay for long distance phone calls, and when you had to call the phone company to install hardware in your home, which they owned and you did not. Where everything cost a lot of money. Well, that was what telephony was like not that long ago, and the federal government sanctioned that monopoly, and then ultimately broke up that monopoly. So I think he would be opposed to any government sanctioned monopoly. But most recently, of course, he joined with the government back, I guess that was during the Clinton administration, in opposing the Microsoft monopoly in operating systems, and ultimately that case led to some spinning off of things. But I think there are cases where you can bring, there are instances when you can bring a case, but they really ought to look at this, what my father described and what the Supreme Court adopted in 1979 as the consumer welfare standard. Don't just judge it on bigness, the business on bigness, or look at what's best for the consumer. For example, in these platforms today, these internet platforms, the services they provide are free. So maybe the consumer isn't getting ripped off by having to pay high prices. Now, of course, we all pay in other ways, because we give these platforms our data. But if there's a problem with that, fix that. But don't. And here's the big thing, of course, which has gotten conservatives wound up and opposing big business and big tech, is censorship.
Right.
But again, censorship is not an antitrust issue, which the current administration, current FTC chairman Andrew Ferguson, is trying to make it into one. It's a free speech issue, and so go ahead and figure out that problem, but don't make it an antitrust issue. It's not a. He said in a rather convoluted. This is Andrew Ferguson, now the chairman of the FTC, in a rather convoluted argument that he ends up with the judgment that, well, it's really all about competition. It's not about competition. It's which makes it his job. So it's not about that. It's about issues of speech, And frankly, it's about issues of liability for these platforms who, publish what you and I write, and then are supposedly liable for what we say. And we have to figure out an answer to that, so that it protects the publisher, but it also protects us in our ability to speak freely and openly. And the last thing I want to do is get the government into looking for an antitrust solution, which will ultimately put the government in charge of speech. Yes. And we've seen what happens when the Biden administration was lurking around with 70 FBI agents yelling and threatening X, then Twitter. We can't allow that to happen. We don't want the government in the middle of our speech freedoms.
Which sort of leads me to my last question here, your predictions for the outcome of this case. But more specifically, don't you think, though, that Mark Zuckerberg should be a little bit worried right now, because even the legal aspects of the case are very weak, but he's sort of the guy that conservatives want to hate right now. He's sort of, that face of censorship. So they want to take him down any which way they can. Is that a worry, you think, on how this case might be resolved?
You're asking me, I think, do I think the case will be decided on the facts and the law, or it will be decided on politics?
Yes.
And I'm a little worried it'll be decided on politics, but I also hope that if Meta loses at district court level, it will go then to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit, my father's old court. And if it loses there, it'll go to the Supreme Court. And I think there's a strong majority for the now well-entrenched, well-ingrained consumer welfare standard. And I think they will ultimately defend the right of a business to make acquisitions and to develop them, and not have and also against the fact that there is no monopoly here, and there's not one that's abusing the market. So I'm very hopeful, but it may take a while to get there.
And it just stinks having to root for Mark Zuckerberg, really, as a conservative. I just hate being on that side of this particular case. But
but see, the thing is, you can do that because you are an honest thinking conservative, whereas the liberal Democrats who brought this case in the Biden administration would never think of doing that.
Well, it was such a delight to have you back on Bold and Blunt. I so value your legal expertise. Robert Bork, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much.
Such a fascinating discussion, right? It always is fascinating when politics and principle sort of collide and head to court. Which side are you going to stand on? It's really a test of character for the individual, right? What do you stand for in America? What are your guiding moral principles? I want to thank you for listening. Remind you, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at WashingtonTimes.com, and of course, wherever podcasts are available. Tune in next time. In the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.